We've seen, of course, that Israel has sort of exercised, absolute air superiority and um, aircraft flying with relative impunity right across Iran. But yet, in spite of that, they've not been able to decimate Iran's ability to strike back.
Space and cyber were upgraded to full-fledged combatant command status
Yeah.
in the USA 3 years back.
Yeah.
It's worked wonderfully. You will not have this precision targeting without space. And what does it mean? See, we have ISRO giving us, that is exploration. The Space Command maneuvers satellites. It alters orbits.
Yeah.
It enhances revisit times for that particular operation. It is aggressive manipulation of space sets. That's the thing we need to see.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of WM Dialogues. I'm once again delighted to have as my guest Lt Gen Raj Shukla, a close friend, colleague, and a coursemate, of course, to top it all. So today we thought we'll talk about something contemporary, and nothing as contemporary as what's been happening between Israel and Iran. So we know as to the 6-day conflict that has taken place, about Operation Rising Lion that was taken on by Israel, followed up in close succession by Midnight Thunder, taken on by the United States. Midnight Hammer, sorry. So let's step back a little first. And if you could walk us through, Raj, I know that you've just come back from Washington, D.C. and had a large number of discussions with, various think tanks, etc. in the United States. If you could walk back and tell us that what was the genesis of this conflict and what was the importance of the timing of this conflict that it took place at this time?
So, Monty, before I get into the Middle East, let me thank you for the dinner so that your viewers must know that this podcast is not free. Anyway, my impression is that this is primarily a contest between Soleimani and Netanyahu. And whether you like them or despise them, they are geniuses in their own way. And the latter day genius is Trump, whether you agree with me or not. But let me tell you how. What injected strategic military life into the Iranian Revolution was Soleimani. When he came up with that whole project of telling the Ayatollah that, I will give you this corridor of 1,000 miles by 1,500 miles. Grow powers like the Hamas, the Hezbollah, the Houthis, and even Syria, and make sure that Israel is kept at a healthy distance. And the broad signaling was that we will build the nuclear program, we will do what we need to do, and if you hit us, we will unleash the power of these four proxies, what the West chose to describe as the tentacles and the head of the octopus. So that was the broad design. It was working very well. Just take your mind back. Iran, what it did in Iraq, what it did in Syria, what it does in Hezbollah, what it does to Hamas. I mean, Nasrullah was an extraordinary leader. You may have differences with him, but he created this whole missile force. The Houthis were not so good, but Israel was for a time on the back foot. Till, I don't know, was it a misadventure? It was certainly not a wise thing what the Hamas goes and does. That October 2003. And before that, the credit must be given to Trump. Whether it was incidental or by design, he takes out Soleimani. After that, no leader in the IRGC has risen to that level. I mean, we have all these loud mouths on Iranian TV, ki hum ye kar denge, wo kar denge. It's all jingoism. Nobody quite did it as craftily as Soleimani did. And I don't think the Ayatollah had anybody to rely on. And therefore, Soleimani is sorely missed, especially if you study the Iranian literature and all. He was a genius of a kind. And now, Netanyahu senses his moment with Soleimani gone. And you just take your mind back. It is really incredible in the military sense of how he cripples Hezbollah, Nasrullah.
And
Syria,
yeah.
that is really
Yeah.
some. And April 2024 and October 2024, they go and neutralize the air defenses, which means that by October 2024, Iran is all bluster. Its AD is absent. What really surprises me, Monty, is that since October 2024, the Russians do nothing. Russians got all these Shahzad drones and all that, and they do nothing to build up Iran's AD.
But maybe because they're totally preoccupied themselves.
Okay,
you know,
fine.
that-
There is a reason, but fine.
Yeah.
What about the Chinese? The Chinese are not preoccupied. And therefore, and so, okay, if I'm in Iran and I see that the Russians and Chinese are not coming to my aid, why step up the nuclear program if you can't defend it? That's the larger issue. It turned out to be a whole lot of bluster which Netanyahu was watching carefully. And he sensed that this was his moment. Now there are two.
So, if I can interrupt, this stepping up of the nuclear program, you
Yeah.
think is this actually just
Exactly.
a spin?
So I
or
was coming to that.
Yeah.
So what I have heard, there are 3-4 opinions. One is that moment the Iranians stepped it up to 3%, which is reactor grade, 3 to 60 to 90 is a given. So either you stop a power in its journey from 0 to 3, rest is all, you can't really stop it. So Iran was well past the 3% mark. So it was always in that realm. Now there are two stories in Washington. In fact, if you hear Steve Bannon, who is actually the closest ideologue of Trump, and Trump calls him very frequently to White House. So once he's heard the NSCS and Tulsi Gabbard and all that, in comes Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon has been arguing publicly. He says, if you started it off, you finish it. He's telling Netanyahu, don't drag us in. This is pre whatever happened. In the MAGA camp when I was in Washington, Marjorie Greene, Steve Bannon, they were all arguing that Netanyahu is taking us for a ride. Now, look at Tulsi Gabbard. March, she says that they are not moving towards a nuclear program. This is the professional opinion. In fact, even after the strike, the leak in the New York Times is that no, they have not damaged it. This is the professional intelligence assessment. But Netanyahu is saying, no, they were not only 60 to 90, they were weaponizing. And they had 8 to 10 bombs. The last statement I heard of Trump before coming for your dinner, Trump says, in a pointed question, he says, I will trust Netanyahu and not my guys. Okay. Look at this.
Yeah.
But now this is Trump.
But maybe because he's already sort of searching for justification.
Could be.
For a decision that he's made at the back of his mind.
Trump also is not such a fool. Trump, in fact, there was a while when Trump kept Netanyahu in place. He was talking to the Iranians, this, that. Yeah. Now, God knows. Now, here beyond this, it's very difficult to decipher what actually happened. But Netanyahu was of the view that they were weaponizing. Many in the MAGA camp said, no, he's dragging you in. And okay, now I'll tell you the Trump logic. Whether we believe it or not is a different matter, but there is a logic to it. His argument is very simplistic. He says, you are sitting on the world's second largest gas reserve, third largest oil reserve. Why do you need nuclear energy, peaceful energy? You don't need it. So when you talk of peaceful nuclear energy, you are actually building a bomb. And he says, this is Trump's argument, very simplistic, but sometimes it makes sense. He says, you are good traders, you got oil, you become the most prosperous economy in the world, I will help you, don't make a bomb. And there is a larger logic to Trump. The Gulf states in which he has invested so much, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and all, which are really powering the AI revolution in USA, they've all told him that we are all with you, Iran should not get a bomb. So there is this larger geopolitics into
so
this.
that is, of course, there's one on the weapon aspect of it. But then there's a larger issue of Iran, and the proxies that they support and the destabilization of Israel, etc. I mean, if you take Hamas, if you take Hezbollah, if you take the Houthis, etc., that's the second aspect.
But so if I may just draw, at least my inference of the linkage with the bomb is that we will build the bomb. These proxies are there so that you don't attack us. Let us build the bomb. As long as you build us, let us build the bomb, we'll do nothing. But what goes wrong is that Hamas attack. Now people say that amongst all the proxies, the one proxy which was, or the proxy which was most out of line was the Hamas. They were not truly listening, because it is not Shia, it is Shia.
I think they were
Sunni.
blindsided. That's another story that Iran was blindsided by this. In fact,
something. But see, the broader geopolitics is this is also an interesting question. I read this somewhere, I don't know where. The nature of the US is, its whole system is that whether it wants to or not, it gets involved in what is called endless wars. Now, when I was in Washington, the whole movement, even amongst MAGA, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, you promised us not to get into these endless wars. That was your campaign promise, so don't. And the beauty of the American system is that even within the Trump movement, whatever divisions are in public, they are on CNN that night, they are on in all think tanks, and they say, nothing wrong, we are telling the president, but we choose to tell him publicly. That was one thing. The larger issue, see, somebody in one of those think tanks raised, this is something we must consider. They say China is strategically disciplined.
Is strategically?
Disciplined.
Okay.
Which means militarily only Taiwan. Anywhere else, non-military instruments.
Right.
So, not even come to the aid of Iran. They may be very close. Now, there is another, I don't know, rumor or some, an item in the news cycles that 3 days before the attack, 5 aircraft of the Chinese went.
Yeah, I read that.
So, whether they took out uranium, centrifuges, God knows. So, everything else but military. That is the signaling. They will do much beyond that. Even the Russians, they will give chips, all kinds of CNC equipment, but they will not take part. So, this is strategic discipline. Whereas USA, one reason or the other, will get sucked into all kinds of wars. And if you see in the MAGA movement, I discovered in Washington, there are 3 distinct voices. One is J.D. Vance, whose private articulation to Trump is that just retreat from every theater.
Yeah.
Western Hemisphere, Greenland, Canada, grow,
it.
Rebuild your military and then go. There is a private acknowledgement that the military is not delivering bang for the buck. $950 billion, you're not delivering out. So concentrate on lethality, readiness, not these woke agendas. By the way, there's a lot of sense in that. AI means Eurocom, IPACOM, invest in AI, all that kind of stuff. The other argument is that the one which actually pushed him out, the previous NSA, the guy, maximalist. All theaters. So Trump has said this opinion out, certainly not maximalist. The guy who's under scrutiny is Eldridge Colby. Eldridge Colby has been arguing within the MAGA camp, wind down these wars in Ukraine and this place, Middle East, China. And there, Paparo has been screaming. Paparo has been saying, these are not exercises, they are rehearsal for it. And I'll give you one piece of statistic which should really worry the Americans. 2017, when they were doing these exercises, they committed 2 brigades. Today it is 42 brigades.
I remember this statement of Paparo. In his congressional hearing.
Amphibious ships, 2/3 is being committed. So I'm just wondering whether the Chinese are just going on increasing it, and suddenly on 30th July they may just walk in. There is a live danger there. Live danger there. Therefore, Bridge is saying pull out from everywhere else. And there is a third one which says no, that you have to pay heed to these issues. So, strategic discipline versus Trump having to make a choice between Chinese primacy and proliferation. See, proliferation is also a danger. It can't be, because if Iran gets weapons, then Japan will get weapons, then South Korea.
And Saudi and all that also, they also
very difficult choices. So I think in this whole thing, when Netanyahu was constantly pressurizing Trump, at one stage Trump said, okay, no commitment, but you go and do your stuff. And when that stuff began to succeed, I mean, now the Israeli jets are over Tehran with impunity. They are taking out this and that. And look at the remarkable success. You've taken out 12 IRGC generals in their beds, 10 top scientists in their beds. I mean, this is what I call intelligence and, ISR dominance. And you heard of that other thing on social media where Mossad is now warning the next 12 IRGC generals, better leave. Look at the psychology.
Yeah, but I mean, if the successes of, Israel was so high, then what was the necessity for the US to jump in the first place
Absolutely.
towards
Now,
the end.
okay, so
So
now the
that-
problem is,
Yeah.
so Netanyahu knew all along that Fordo especially, to an extent Natanz, and so my understanding is right, Natanz is where the enriched uranium is largely kept. Isfana is where the research is happening,
And
and Fordo is where it is deep underground in the hills. Now, if David Patrius is to be believed, there is a fourth place.
okay.
The fourth place, which is not in the public domain, is where the centrifuges and the uranium has already been moved out.
Okay.
That has been moved out. But Netanyahu's design was that, see, we can't take out Fordo. We have prepared the ground for you. Please come in, nothing will happen. So Rising Lion set the stage for Midnight Hammer. And Trump, the transactionalist is that he is, saw that things were going well.
So why not sort of
Why
take
not
some credit?
why not just go in?
So let's
And-
come to this aspect then. You know, we've talked about the geopolitical aspect. Now let's come about the military part of this entire operation. I mean, on both sides, we've seen, of course, that Israel has sort of exercised, absolute air superiority and aircraft flying with relative impunity right across Iran. But yet, in spite of that, they've not been able to decimate Iran's ability to strike back through long-range weapons. So this is an interesting combination. Like last time, what we've here in you have largely Air Force on one side, using their strike elements, and the rocket force on the other side using their strike elements. So it's a different sort of a conflict which has taken place. And then, of course, this US operation, which I was strangely surprised with the amount they disclosed, on the deception move and how they actually came from the east all the way flying from Whiteman Air Base, with a number of aircraft on each taking part, etc. So, can you talk a little bit more about what you learned in Washington about the military aspects of this entire operation?
Yes, so not entirely Washington, but generally following this whole thing. See, when it comes to the Iranians and the Israelis, ultimately it boiled down to the number of ballistic missiles that he had and the arrow interceptors.
Yeah.
Of course, the others, Iron Dome and all, but I told it was principally the arrow interceptors. And the Israelis realized after a while that their arrow interceptors were depleting. So they had to take out the ballistic missiles. Now, how many they took out is not known, but the general speculation is that they brought it down to 2,000.
I think they were also focusing on the launchers because they felt that the launchers
I'm
were a
talking about-
finite number.
yeah,
The
launchers.
missiles might have been,
Launchers. So launchers, also the missiles, there are many things when
Yeah.
the missiles are moving. The ability of the missile system to strike, that is the issue, versus the interceptors, which are also not an infinite number. And therefore and now see, this is where that Israeli genius comes, when they infiltrate, go inside, and create those drone factories which took out those ballistic missiles. I mean, militarily it's an act of genius. We know in our conditions what happens. So this, and also this bit of the leadership and all, because in the first 24, 48 hours, there was no reaction. There was a kind of paralysis. Even Khamenei was heading for some hole. So what do you do? So in combination, all this helped. But the other reality is equally right, that it has been proven that Iron Dome, Arrow 2, Arrow 3, THAAD,
have all got limitations.
they all got limited. You have penetrated them.
Yeah.
Now see, I draw the direct inference with India. With Pakistani drones and all, Akash will get by. But with China, if it actually is, now many people say it's fluff, God knows. I have read it many places, their weekly capacity of production is, I have read two figures, 7,000 cruise missiles and 10,000 cruise missiles.
Per week.
Per week, even if it is 5,000, to be stepped up in a war situation, you see the advantage that they have. Here they are not, intercept, this close equation is just not there. In that sense, just see how vulnerable we are. Now the argument I've heard in India is that we are too large. That's a reality. But can any political leadership say that we'll protect Delhi and Bangalore will be exposed? It will just not work. So if the Americans are now, this is where Trump, he gets it right on some issues. In his last tenure, space, he made it a separate service. He made it a war fighting. This time he has said $175 billion for that, whatever fancy.
Golden Dome, I think.
But something will come of it. In our case, I'm saying, chalo, $25 billion, or what is it, million dollars, $25 million. But think of a nationwide AD architecture. You need an AD topology. And the other lesson from the question you asked, see what the Iranians and the Pakistanis get, which we don't have. This whole space in EW, cyber, Baidu, 40 satellites outcomes goes to Pakistan. The Americans give it to Israel. We don't have it. Now, if you are practicing strategic autonomy, then invest in these platforms or partner. This is a gross deficiency with us, which we just have to somehow do this. The Pakistanis get it absolutely on a platter, so do the Israelis. And if you don't have this, then you have to have air power and drone missile force, not either or option. Now, these are the real deep debates which have to be addressed in our contingency. So, anyway, getting back to this, so this is what Netanyahu said, and Trump, counted his marbles, did his mathematics, and said, listen, I have told my people that Iran will not get a bomb. So now is the time to exercise military power. And knowing Washington, what he was most worried, I am told, was about operational security, these leaks. So he really clamped down on this, meetings, people who would know.
And he put another spin also that I'll decide after 2 weeks and things like that.
And see, that deception bit was a little clever. When he told them, told Netanyahu and others that I have not made up our mind. He had made up his mind that he would strike. When he told the Iranians that Saturday Witkoff will meet you. So, all that. And finally he hit. But insofar as the military operation is concerned, I think it's an overwhelming success. See, it's not easy to fly 14 B-2s that distance
and come back without, of course, numerous refuelings en route, but without touching down anywhere.
Communications, look at in the context of Sindoor and all, these are valuable lessons. Also stealth. You went in and went out and not a single missile fired at you. These are all great things. Now, whatever the ultimate effect, the hit was accurate. Whether it could penetrate and all will be seen. And even the deception. 14 aircraft left at the same time. 7 went towards Guam, and the American media picked up the Guam bit and didn't pick up this. So I saw a whole lot of shows on Guam and what's going to happen, and these chaps are already on their way. And the other thing is, you see, this is the point, allow me a brief diversion. April 1980. 53 Americans are taken hostage in that embassy, and America reacts similarly. Biggest power, but CENTCOM not in place, no theaterization. You give it to a ad hoc task force, ground commander, air force commander, all those kind of issues, total disaster. It is not an expression of air, land, or this is STRATCOM, Transportation Command, Space Command, EW, Cyber Command, which are joint structures.
All operating seamlessly.
STRATCOM is headed by an Air Force guy, the number 2 is a naval guy. This is the lesson we have to examine in our case. Air power is important, but air power must be unleashed in theaterized structures. This is the big difference. And there are a lot of professional things, we can debate them, but a great success. Now, moment this package reaches the landmass, you have these sweep strikes packages from Eurocom coming in. So it starts off with STRATCOM, Eurocom, Transportation Command, and moment you're in CENTCOM, you have the missiles from the nuclear subs, you have the 75 PGMs. This is the whole military piece coming together, and the CDS controlling it in a very smooth operational way. Asset allocation, what is to be done. He was in command of it at each time.
So the whole concept of integrated operations, in every aspect, bringing all the domains together, and you sequence, phase, and orchestrate them.
And see, I'm telling you, very respected minds in India are making the wrong decision. I've heard some very senior Air Force officers saying, after Sindoor, air power, so walk back on theaterization. No, the argument has to be yes, air power, yes, AD, but in theaterized structures. And this is the modern way of fighting wars. And look at the seamless coordination of all that. So just let me make 2 points. Space and cyber were upgraded to full-fledged combatant command status in the USA 3 years back. It's worked wonderfully. You will not have this precision targeting without space. And what does it mean? See, we have ISRO giving us, that is exploration. The Space Command maneuvers satellites. It alters orbits.
Yeah.
It enhances revisit times for that particular operation. It is aggressive manipulation of space sets. That's the thing we need to see. And now I've heard Trump explaining this, or Hegseth explaining this. He says, from the surface you can make out that the whole thing has been burned down. From the holes you can make out that the MOPs have gone right down. And in a few days we will discover the damage caused. Now you look at their professionalism. Despite Hegseth asserting this, the chairman JCS says, before I give you a professional view, I will await BDA assessment.
Okay.
He doesn't commit to the political stuff.
Yeah.
Now this is the hallmark of a good military, and perhaps they are awaiting what that comes. So it is an accurate strike. How effective? 2-3 reasons.
Is yet to come out.
One is if they have already moved the centrifuges out and all that. And see, my basic thing is that if the bomb is in the head, you can't stop it.
Yeah.
You can delay it. So it is a successful strike. It would have pushed it back. It could have delayed it. But it will have to be negotiated.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, even if you delay, it gives you a window. And in that window, you can apply other instruments to maybe, come to a understanding that is more lasting in that sense.
And with a 6,000 or 5,000 year old civilization, you will have to negotiate.
Yeah.
So B2s have worked temporarily. Have they offered a permanent solution? I don't think so.
But it's given you the, as we said, the window to sort of work towards that permanent. So that's a long discussion today. So moving ahead, would you say, what are the prognosis, let's say? I mean, in the medium term at least. Long term, very difficult to predict in this region. But in the medium term, where do you see the current state of the Iranian regime? Are there too many internal contradictions right now, and have they been weakened in this, or have they internally been strengthened as an outcome of this conflict? And how is it going to play out in their long-term relationship with their regional neighbors as well as with the
it's very difficult to say, but it's just 2-3 comments. One is, when we talk of regime change, I don't understand what it means. So you can knock off Khomeini, but the next guy will again be from the IRGC. It will be Pizdeshkian or somebody, because the IRGC now has been in power for 50 years.
So they're well entrenched, absolutely.
Very well entrenched. So there are no options. So I don't understand what this, and therefore I've heard Vance and all some sensible voices now saying that no, it's not regime change. It is just taking out, but you have Trump to add to the confusion. He suddenly pops in and says no, regime change may be politically incorrect, but so I really don't understand what that it is. But just from the American perspective, Iran cannot have a bomb because it alters the
regional dynamics totally.
And it is not only Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE don't want Iran with a bomb. And the other big Trump investments, I had gone to Dubai 3-4 months back, and I went to these places for the first time, and I saw a very modernizing strategic discourse, which is UAE, Saudi Arabia and all saying away from Islamic fundamentalism. MBS
he's a real reformer.
He's a rock star status. He's popular with women there. He's trying to get great reforms. And what they are also doing, they are saying, we are no longer talking of Islamic fundamentalism and all, we are talking of AI. We will power the AI revolution. We will fund your AI revolution. We will give you energy. They are talking of dream cities. And you meet these youngsters there, their vocabulary has changed. So there is a part of the Arab world which is looking, they say that don't equate us with the old mullahs and all. So there is this part of the Arab world, there is this revolution which is stuck in a time warp. And there is Israel. So it is extreme.
So these have to be reconciled in some way or the other.
The larger issue of Trump is Abraham Accords. He's trying to get Israel with the modernizing strategic discourse while excluding Iran. But the fact of the matter is that Iran is a 6,000-year-old civilization. It is 3 times the size of France, 90 million people. You cannot isolate them. You have to get them into the discourse. How do you do it is a big challenge because the IRGC has such deep roots over there. So, it's not an easy thing to say what to do. In one way, Trump has been a success. He has connected America with the modernizing strategic discourse. And, investments and whatever his logic is. And he and that other thing also sounds very fanciful. वो गाजा में उसको रिवेरा बना देना, but this is not just Trump's idea. His son-in-law Jared Kushner has been propagating this for years,
a long time,
and there are people who are willing to invest in it. So a very determined attempt is. But now look at the contradiction. You suddenly go and legitimize Ahmad Shara in Syria, so ISIS is legitimized. There are all kinds of contradictions here. So Middle East does remain a challenge, and in the larger sense, I somehow fear that America will get sucked into the Middle East again, and China will have a
free run
in Taiwan.
So, okay, I think we've covered a substantial amount of territory over there at least, and so remains for me once again, Raj, to thank you for this conversation.
Thank you. And always your podcast
always a delight.
Growing, huh?
And look forward to many such more in times to come.
Thanks a lot,
plenty.